Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Best and the Brightest, Chapter 11. Jamie was late for her humanoid anatomy class because she'd been up all night, unsuccessfully trying to track down Maul. She hurried through the commons, even though she knew she wouldn't hear a word of the lecture. But she was fairly sure Maul was all right. She had finally gotten hold of the Trill Symbiosis Commission and found out they hadn't been notified about Molly Nor, and they were the ones who would hear first if a symbiont was killed. There was still that nagging doubt in the back of her mind because she hadn't gotten a message yet from Maul. But she could almost hear her disapproval that Jamie had missed a class on account of that. After 2 years of solid B's in engineering and her struggles to get B+ or higher in the pre-med courses, she would still be lucky to make it into medical school. And the commendation she received after the Zod Revolution was her only ace in the hole to counter the rather unimpressive stack of reprimands she had received. Jamie was reassuring herself about Maul when the image of Admiral Brand appeared on the public screens, halting her in mid-stride. She joined the swarm of cadets who crowded in close as Brand glanced down for a moment before making her announcement. As all of you know, during the battle and emergency saucer separation of the Enterprise, one of the crew members was killed. Jamie drew a breath, seeing her own fear reflected in the anxious faces of her fellow cadets. Admiral Brand's expression was often considered to be severe, with her white, upswept hair and striking dark brows, but today she looked older than Jamie had ever remembered. "I'm sorry to inform you that it was one of our own cadets, Hammond Titus, who perished while performing his duty on board the Enterprise." A young woman nearby gasped out loud, clutching her hands to her mouth and staring at the screen. A friend took her arm, offering support as Brand continued. "Hammond Titus will receive posthumous field promotion to ensign, and his life and accomplishments will be celebrated in a memorial service soon after the Enterprise crew members have returned to Starfleet headquarters." Her lips tightened. "We never like to hear when a fellow officer has been forced to give their life in the line of duty, especially an officer as young and talented as Ensign Titus." Brand had to pause for a moment. "We all would have liked to see the career Hammond Titus was destined to make for himself, but we shall have to be content with the time he spent as part of our family in Starfleet." Jamie was so stunned she couldn't move. She had never considered that it could be Hammond Titus. All she had worried about was Maul, figuring Nev Rio would never get near trouble, and Titus could always get out of it. Titus dead? She couldn't believe it. Bobby Ray went with Jamie to the beam-down point at Starfleet headquarters to wait for Molly Nor and Nev Rio to return to Earth. Bobby Ray had returned to the Academy early when he found out that it was Titus who had been killed. He didn't really think about it, actually. He beamed over to the Academy before he realized he hadn't said goodbye to his mother. She wasn't exactly pleased that he wouldn't be coming back for a few days, and he got the idea she wanted to mother him, which would have made him hang by his claws from the ceiling in less than an hour. Jamie wouldn't wait for Enor to come to the Academy. She insisted on going to Starfleet at the ungodly hour Enor was scheduled to return, having already been debriefed en route. Bobby Ray pretended to grumble about being routed out of bed, but it really didn't take much to get him to the beam-down point exactly on time. And as they waited for the transporter to materialize, he was hit with a pang of remorse when only Molly Nor and Nev Rio appeared. He was glad to see them, but it was suddenly very real when Titus didn't appear with the others. He would never see Titus again. Molly Nor saw it in his eyes, and she patted his arm with a furrowed brow. With only one glance, he could tell she was taking it very hard. Jamie was hugging Enor like she never wanted to let go, laughing and crying at the same time. "You were with him, weren't you?" Bobby Ray asked her, even as Jamie was trying to tell Molly-Nor how happy she was to have her back. Enor looked at Bobby Ray. "We were at the hatch, and he thought the docking latch was jammed. He just leaped through, and the force field snapped on before I could follow, and then..." Jamie was wiping her eyes, her face crumpled, as she thought about Titus, but she comforted Enor. Bobby Ray turned away, telling the transporter operator, "I want to go back to the academy." Can I come with you?" Nevrio asked. Bobby Ray put one arm around the Bajoran's shoulders, giving the smaller man a solid shake. "You know I wouldn't leave without you." They left Jamie and Enor at Starfleet headquarters so Enor could get her orders. As they materialized back at the academy, Rio said, "I've transferred back to the academy. I'll teach in the geophysics department, and I've had enough of starships for a while." "Ah!" Starsa screamed. She ran into the room, saw the two of them together. She didn't stop till she ran straight into Nevrio, throwing her arms around him and kissing first one cheek, then the other, over and over again. "I'm so glad you're alive." Everyone in the transporter room began to chuckle, then laugh at the awkward expression on the former Vedic's face. Even Bobby Ray began to smile, thinking Nevrio deserved to have such an exuberant welcome. He should have done it himself, but he couldn't stop thinking about Titus. Maul liked the way Jamie kept holding her hand or stroking her arm, as if she had to reassure herself that she was really there. Maul felt bad about how long it had taken for her to get a message through to Jamie, but she had been unconscious for nearly 24 hours after the crash. Now, as she hurried to get her orders, sick leave until she was recovered from her concussion, then 2 weeks R&R before she had to report to Starbase 153 to join an astrophysics team on Ditalix B. "That's not fair," Jamie said when she saw the orders. "Only a few hours away. How long will you be there?" "Months," Molly-Nor assured her. "Maybe a year? There's a neutrino migration taking place in the outer hydrogen reaction zone to the inner helium core of the star. It's instantaneous as far as galactic events go, and incredibly complex." "You're going to love that," Jamie said, "and I'll love it that we'll get to see each other all the time. I was afraid I'd lost you when we just found each other." "You mean just after I gave in and finally admitted that I loved you?" Maul said, only half teasing. Jamie ducked her head. "I know it wasn't until the Izad Revolution, when you saw that I could accomplish something, that you started to love me." "That's not true." Maul stopped her so she could look her right in the eyes. "Engineer, doctor, you know that doesn't matter. I loved you long before the coup." Jamie furrowed her brow, shaking her head uncertainly. "You never said that before." "No." She walked over to the railing, overlooking Paris, twisting the disc with her orders. "It was Titus who convinced me that I was pushing your love away." "Titus!" Jamie exclaimed. "He did nothing but torment me. He kept saying I was infatuated or in puppy love." "Well, before our trip to Ramizad, we somehow got to talking." Maul's smile was sad. "He brought you up, of course. He said that anyone who continued to love me for almost 3 years was worth giving a chance." "He said that?" Jamie's mouth stayed open. Maul nodded. "Actually, he said you were either completely off your crock for being so persistent, or I was encouraging you. He was right. I did love you. I always have. And I've been telling you that in so many ways, except openly. I was unfair to you, but I've hardly known what I think since I got this symbiont." Jamie was still shaking her head. "You knew you loved me before Ramizad. Then why did you wait until after the coup to tell me?" Molyneux pursed her lips, knowing she was the image of her old standoffish self. You know why. You were chasing after me so hard that all I could do was run. Jamie looked sheepish, but she suddenly started blinking, and Moll remembered too. Titus. Moll felt her throat tighten again, as it always did, as it haunted her. Titus. Her only consolation was that his life wouldn't be forgotten, not for a long, long time. Jamie put her arms around Moll and leaned her forehead against hers. I wish I could thank him. So do I, Moll agreed with a sigh. Captain Picard faced the cadets in the Grand Assembly Hall at the Academy. We are gathered here together to remember our comrades who have fallen in the line of duty. Ensign Hammond Titus selflessly performed his duty on board the Enterprise, and for that he gave his life. Nev Rio swallowed, bending his head. He was standing to one side of the stage, summoned there by an aide to Admiral Brand, who asked him if he would mind saying a few words about Titus. Rio agreed, of course, but he really didn't think much about it. There were dozens who would rise to speak about the spirited cadet who had been so full of life. Rio kept forgetting Titus wouldn't stride into the room with a quip and a laughing jibe to send in his direction. Rio had liked Titus because the cadet worked hard to make sure everyone liked him, especially those he teased the most. Look at Jamie. She was torn apart by his death, yet anyone at the Academy would have said the two squabbled like they couldn't stand each other, like they were brother and sister. Ensign Titus is in good company. Picard's measured tones were somehow soothing a somber yet fitting closure for too short a life. Captain James T. Kirk also gave his life to save the entire Viridian system, ensuring that 230 million people are alive and well today. They don't know whom to thank for their survival, but we can remember the deeds of Captain Kirk and Ensign Titus, and we can look to their example. As Jim told me, we must never stop trying to make a difference. On that ringing note, Rio held his head higher, remembering how Titus wanted nothing more than to be the best Starfleet officer he could be. Now, Picard added, I would like to turn this over to one who is more spiritual than I, one who knew Ensign Titus and was a member of his first squad. He also went through the battle and crash of the Enterprise. Picard somehow picked Rio out of the crowd. Ensign Nev Rio. Rio's throat closed shut. More spiritual. He's supposed to speak after Captain Picard? No. But the eyes of the cadets were urging him toward the stage. As he slowly made his way forward, he realized that many of the cadets knew him, more than he would have imagined. And he recognized the two people in the front row from their similarity to Titus, family members who had probably come from the memorial. How could he speak? He couldn't even think. Somehow he made it to the stage where Captain Picard shook his hand, resting his other on Rio's shoulder. Rio looked into his captain's eyes, remembering in a rush the first day he had met Picard, reporting to duty on the Enterprise. It had felt as if, with one keen glance, Picard had taken his measure as a man. Now he felt reassured by Picard's sympathy and by his murmured assurance, "Speak your heart." Rio returned the pressure of his hand, straightening up. "Serving you is an honor, sir." Picard smiled, accepting Rio's acknowledgement. Then he was facing the Grand Assembly Hall, row after row of silent cadets, jammed in so tight that they were sitting in the aisles and standing along the sides and in the doorways. He knew his image appeared on every screen in the Academy, and everyone was watching because everyone knew Titus. "We all miss Titus," he said, his voice breaking a little. "The fact that I'm standing up here today is a testament to his ability to draw people to him. to add everyone who came within his reach to his vast network of friends and allies. As far as I could tell, he only had one requirement for friendship: that you always do your best and try your hardest to overcome your own limitations and those of others. Nevria ducked his head for a moment, hearing perfect silence. He once told me that he joined Starfleet because we were given the freedom to work for our rights. And unlike most people he knew, he didn't believe those rights should be given to him or anyone. He was always more than willing to work for what he believed in, and to tell others they should work for what they believed in. Some people were irritated by his bluntness, his honesty. I don't know. I always treasured that about him because I always knew exactly where I stood with him. Rio realized he was choking up. We still need Titus, but now I'll have to carry on his work for him instead of with him.